Howdy folks, welcome back to the Steampunk Desperado channel. I'm your host, the Steampunk Desperado, and I'm bringing you news and reviews of that most wonderful subgenre of science fiction, steampunk. In light with the steampunk theme, we often touch on things like arts and crafts and history and other related works of fiction. One of the things I've noticed here on the web with streaming services such as YouTube is that people seem to be quite fond of lists. Top 10 this, bottom 10 that. And I love lists too, so I've resolved to do more of them. I've already done top 10 steampunk novels, top 10 steampunk, or top 8 rather, steampunk comics. I'm working on anime and so on. And I've also addressed a few other related things like alternate histories. And in this case, today, I'm doing my 10 favorite magical histories. A little bit different. Overlapping, but not quite the same. In this case, we deal with a historical novel that is based on real history, so it excludes, fantasy realms, like in Tolkien. But in this case, there's an element of magic or something of a magical nature or vein. So these are my top 10, as usual, going from 10 to 1. Number 10, Dead Iron, The Age of Steam by Devin Monk, 2011. Now this is in a very intriguing supernatural style steampunk, which is set in the American West, which is something I always love, being the Desperado. The town of Hallelujah, Oregon is one of those insular, close-minded places that you often see in Western movies. And the protagonists are 3 outcast types. There's Cedar, he's a drifter with a very serious curse. And May, who's a witch, but she's a good witch. But yet, that doesn't mean that people tolerate her. That's the problem. And finally, Rose, who's an orphan, and she's also a tinker, which is a very cool steampunk concept that Monk invents. It's a person who has this almost magical affinity with technology. She can build really amazing things. The villain here is Shard LaFell, who's a tycoon who's financing the railroad through town. And he's very creepy, and he's got a really, really super creepy supernatural henchman. So the 3 are at odds with him. And it's a good adventure and some very imaginative storytelling here. Number 9, The Last Days of New Paris by Sheena Mieville, 2016. I am probably murdering his name. Sorry. This is a very quirky novel, celebrated by critics. It's in the new weird style. And it's an alternate World War II type history in which the war has been prolonged because both sides started dabbling in magic. Now, the Nazis started to summon demons to further their cause, and the Allies and the French partisans fought back by dabbling in magic of their own. And the big heroes in Paris are the Surrealist artists who have found a way to invoke magic to bring their creations to life. And there's some pretty crazy stuff where these really oddball statues are like roaming the streets. But that's how they battle demons. It involves Sam, an American war photographer, and Thibault, a French partisan who's also in with the artists. And one of the most intriguing aspects is a real-life historical person named Jack Parsons. He was an American rocket engineer and who visited Marseille, the Marseille artists in 1941, and his life story is as crazy as fiction. I would definitely check that out. I wasn't aware of that until just recently. Number 8, The Conjurers by David Wade, also 2016. Now, full disclosure, I know David Wade, he's a friend of mine, and I would not, however, prejudice my review. So, in light of that, I must say that if I'm reviewing something by a friend, I won't review it if I think it's bad. I'll only do it if it's good. So, So that means this is pretty good. And this is set in 14th century Europe. It's kind of a YA in the fact that the characters are young, although it's very gritty and kind of violent, so not very sensitive, not for young children. It involves a pair of Irish orphans, Eamon and Caitlin, and also Teresa, who's the young daughter of an Italian nobleman. And their stories are separate threads, but they kind of come together because they all have magical powers that, you know, they didn't ask for. They're just blessed with them. And there's these evil wizard types who are trying to capture them to use them in some very arcane and horrible ceremonies, you know. And there's this exciting adventure, in places that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and a very rich period atmosphere and really elegant language that portrays the times. And the antagonists are quite evil, including the conniving witch Circe and the cruel maestro from Genoa. Almost a little too evil, but it makes it fun. Number 7, Timekeeper by Tara Sim, 2016. Also 2016. I encountered this book almost by accident. I bought it in a used bookstore, and because the cover was really awesome, and this turned out to be one of the more creative type steampunks I've ever seen. And this takes place in an alternate Victorian world in which clock towers actually control time. And there's kind of a pseudo-Roman mythology behind that she explains. That is this god of time and so on. And there's a special class of artisans called timekeepers who maintain the clocks and make sure nothing goes wrong with them. The hero is a 17-year-old boy named, or young man, maybe we should say, named Danny Hart. And he's one of the youngest people ever to become a timekeeper. And he's got the gift for sensing the strands of time and repairing them. And he's trying to reclaim his reputation and his confidence after a near disaster in which the clock exploded, which almost stopped the surrounding town in time, which is something that happened to Danny's own father, who was also a timekeeper, and he's stranded in this other town that's still been stopped. Now, in servicing the clock tower in Enfield, another small town near London, Danny meets Colton, who's the spirit of the clock, which is something that is thought to be a myth. But Colton's like a real person living in the clock, and he's a beautiful young man who Danny falls for. But you're not supposed to fall in love with the clock spirit. Really bad things can happen. So it's a very intriguing story. It's got an inventive idea, and you've got the gay angle, makes it a little bit interesting and different than your typical steampunk. Number 6, The Prestige by Christopher Priest, 1996. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with this because it was made into a movie by Christopher Nolan, and it starred, and that was in 2006, and it starred Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, and David Bowie. I mean, talk about star power. And Scarlett Johansson, another of my favorites. And this is technically not about magic per se, but about stage magicians. However, it involves some technology that's so out there that it's kind of magical in my view. Now, the magicians are Rupert Angers, who's an aristocrat, and Alfred Borden, who's from a commoner family. And they've got this feud and this intense rivalry. And this is late Victorian England, and this feud reaches across generations, which you don't see in the movie. Borden has this amazing trick in which he reappears in a different place. And in an effort to duplicate this, Angers goes to America to meet with Nikola Tesla to get this piece of amazing technology which allows him to do that. But it's got some very serious repercussions at the same time. And so it's rather lengthy, and it takes a while to get to the Tesla part, which is of course my favorite part, but the detail is rich and amazing, and the characters are are fascinating. And the movie is one of my favorites. In fact, I thought the movie was better than the book, which is rare. But the book is still pretty good, and I definitely recommend it. Number 5. This I just recently encountered. The Golem and the Genie by Helen Wecker, 2013. And this is a fascinating tale of 2 supernatural immigrants to New York City in 1899. And the Golem, as many of you probably know, is a clay creature that's brought to life by ancient Hebrew magic, or it can be. And it's usually used for something unpleasant, like if you have to kill somebody or defend yourself against evil. And this golem is created by a disgraced rabbi, not for that reason, but as to be an idealized wife for this wealthy merchant who's leaving for America. And the merchant dies on ship on the way there, so the golem is abandoned and with very little knowledge of human society. I mean, she's abandoned. She's supposed to be this virtuous woman, but at the same time, what's she supposed to do? And the genie is this is an Arabic folktale of the race of fire people called the jinn. And this is not a cartoon genie from Aladdin. This is based very vividly on the actual Arabic mythology. And this genie was brought to America by Syrian immigrants in a copper flask, unknowingly, which they bring to a metalsmith. In repairing it, accidentally releases the genie. And he is also a fish out of water in human society. Not as powerful as you would believe in, like Arabian Nights type of thing. He definitely has powers, but he has deficiencies too. If he stays out in the rain and gets too wet, he'll die because he's made of fire, even though he's trapped in human form by an evil wizard centuries ago. So it's very amazing. It's got a lot of strong elements of both Yiddish culture and Arabic culture, and the 2 characters, of course, encounter each other, but their encounter isn't as smooth as you might expect, or perhaps of course you expect it's not going to be smooth, because this is a novel and it's got to be intriguing. We have to have conflict. So I would very much recommend this one. Number 4, Soulless by Gail Carriger, 2009. Another one in Victorian London. Not a surprise. And this has also been classified as a steampunk, though I see it as more of a Victorian urban fantasy. And this is a London in which vampires and werewolves are real, and they're often leading citizens. And there's all of these political machinations involved in them versus ordinary people. So the protagonist is Alexia Terabati, and she's a human woman who's got an intriguing deficiency. She lacks a soul, hence the name Soulless. And this gives her some unusual powers in dealing with the supernatural creatures. They can't harm her. In fact, if a werewolf who's in werewolf form, when wolf form touches her, they immediately transform back into human, because her lack of a soul, I guess, saps the magic. And there are some elements of steampunk, including there's a menacing automaton, but again, this is mostly magic, which doesn't make it bad. In fact, it's quite good. And there's a romantic element, and there's fantastic characters. Alexia has this romance with a very aristocratic and arrogant guy who's also a werewolf, and then a good friend of hers is a very flamboyant gay vampire. And this is the first in the Parasol Protectorate series, which I believe there were 5 of these books. Haven't read the rest of them yet, but eventually will. Number 3, His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik, 2006. Here is an alternative version of the Napoleonic Wars. So it's a little bit earlier, pre-Victorian, I think, what is it called, Regency, perhaps? And this is a world in which dragons are real. You could argue that this book isn't about magic, because Novik paints a world in which dragons are real biological creatures, but at the same time, they're very fantastical. I mean, they have the power of speech. Some of them can breathe fire, others spit poison, and they can, for the most part, they can fly. And so they're just so amazing. To me, they're magical. The story involves Captain Lawrence, who's a British naval officer whose ship apprehends a French ship and seizes their cargo, which is a dragon egg sent by the Emperor of China to Napoleon as a gift. And this egg hatches unexpectedly while it's still on ship, and the first person it sees is Captain Lawrence, which is kind of by accident, because a dragon is like a bird, and they impress on like a parent figure. And this is a disaster for Lawrence because he has to quit the Navy and become a dragon trainer / rider for the good of the country. But that also makes him a social outcast because the dragon riders have such an odd culture that society of that time can't accept them. And he makes great sacrifices in order to be with his dragon, which he first resents, but eventually he comes to have this amazing magical bond with the dragon, who's named Temeraire, who can speak English, French, and everything, of course, and they have this wonderful brotherly bond between the two of them that just can't be broken. And this again is the first in a series, in a trilogy, I believe. Again, I haven't read any further, but it's also very good. Number 2, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, 2004. A lot of you may have heard about this because it's been made into a BBC series, and I did see the first episode, which was really intriguing and odd. And it starts a little slow, which is probably why I didn't get into the series at the time, but now that I've read the book, I will probably go back and revisit it, because the book is quite good. But in this alternate history, magic is recognized as an important part of British history, of their heritage. But the ability has been lost in the centuries since the peak of British magic under a mysterious man called the Raven King, who ruled the North. I believe his capital was Manchester, or one of those cities. And the mysterious Mr. Norrell, back in the current time, he's an aristocrat with a lot of time on his hand, and he studies ancient texts and is able to revive the use of magic, but he doesn't want to share his knowledge. He keeps it to himself because he feels it's dangerous. So he's very zealous of this knowledge, and he finally comes forth to the country as a gatekeeper, basically, of magic. But at the same time, a young upstart named Jonathan Strange appears, who has this talent that allows him to learn magic even if he just finds fragments of spells and he can do them. So Norrell reluctantly takes him on as an apprentice, and they immediately start falling into conflict because they have very different philosophies. Strange ends up working for the British military to help fight Napoleon with his magic, and it's a very interesting and funny things he does, including moving towns around magically. And at the same time, there's this very sinister undercurrent to the story, because Norrell does some very unethical things involving the Fae, who, as in usual mythology, are a very zealous, they're a cruel and arrogant race. Not kind of like Tinkerbell, but bigger. He unleashes some rather unpleasant forces on people around him, including Jonathan Strange's lovely wife, a lovely and very devoted wife. And it's very touching when Strange has to come rescue her from the land of the Fae. And that alone is worth the price of reading the book. It's amazing and moving. Number 1. I found that in doing these lists, I often repeat things because there are certain books that defy description. You can't neatly categorize them in one place or another, and also they're so good that you have to talk about them more than once. And this one is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, 2011. Now this was my number 3 choice for top 10 steampunk, and I consider it steampunk, although most people don't because it's more magical and romantic, but still, it's got clockwork. It's got that kind of technology, and there's this amazing clock that's part of the story. This involves the Night Circus, or Circus of Dreams, which goes mysteriously from town to town. They only open from dusk till dawn, and they give people these amazing experiences, these unbelievable acrobatics and feats of magic, and they even get to do things like climb through the clouds at one point. And it's all very wonderfully portrayed and imagined. It makes you think you're there. Now, this also involves a feud between magicians, but unlike the Prestige, these are actual magicians. One of whom is masquerading as a stage magician in order to not be, outcast from society. And that's a cover for his real knowledge of magic. Now he and his former mentor, the mysterious Mr. A.H., who has disappeared from the world and he's almost impossible to see because of his magic, they have become rivals, and they have this bet which can produce the most amazing, which can do the most amazing things with a protege. And Prospero, the stage magician, has this illegitimate daughter, Celia Bowen, who has inherited his talent, and he's training her, and she becomes involved with the Circus of Dreams. And at the same time, Mr. A.H. finds this orphan boy, Marco Alistair, who also has magical talent, and he becomes involved in kind of the business end of the Circus of Dreams. And they are rivals. They are one is supposed to destroy the other as part of the bet. But of course, this being a romantic time, they fall in love. So it is very amazing. It's very poignant as they struggle with their destinies and struggle against their destinies, and the ending is just heart-wrenching. But it's something that I really is one of my favorite. I really love. It's one of my favorite books ever, and I'm happy to say that this is slated to become a movie, hopefully for release late this year if the pandemic doesn't delay it. Hopefully not. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very looking forward to this, bringing this wonderful book to light. So that's my list. Top 10 favorite magical histories, all of which are great. I would rate the lowest ones as at least 4 gears and the highest 5+. So let me know if you like this, if you have any suggestions for lists I should do, or books or novels or movies or anime that I should explore. I want to thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. That helps us spread the good steampunk word. And for now, this is the Steampunk Desperado saying adios amigos from the Steampunk Desperado channel, where the past meets the future and the present is extraordinary.